welcome to another episode of the Data Dialogues podcast. And today we'll be chatting about You Won't Believe What's in the Attic. I am your host, Larissa Bedgood, Head of Marketing here at PGM. And with me today is Michelle Taves, who is VP and Group GM of our Data and Marketing Group. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Excited to be here, Larissa.
Yeah, we've done a couple of really fun episodes, today being no exception. So to kick us off, attics are funny places. Attics in general tend to be dusty, maybe a little mysterious, sometimes full of things that you just shove up there and forget. Maybe some forgotten treasures if you're lucky. Maybe a mummy. Stay tuned to our episode for that one. But every now and then, something way less charming may be up there, like a water heater tucked up there. Michelle, okay, what is this water heater business and how does that tie into home factors?
Yep. So it's really interesting. There are certain states across the U.S., particularly states that don't have basements, that the construction has thought that it was a really good idea to put a water heater up in the attic. Now, perhaps it saves space and it doesn't like stick out and make it look ugly in the house, but water heaters can leak. And then if you could just imagine a mess that it will create if your water heater starts to leak. So obviously, whenever at PGM, we have a product called Home Factors, and we really have the ability to understand about the inside of the home, especially when we're trying to look at risk. So obviously for us, if we're able to detect that there's a water heater in the attic, that's a little bit more of a risk for water intrusion damage than if they just put it in the garage, which you would think most people would do, but
no. And today, though, we are diving into the attic, not for insurance report purposes or risk underwriting, but we are going to be diving into some crazy, surprising, and weird discoveries that people have found hiding above their heads. If you want to kick us off with this first one.
Absolutely. It's actually from one of my favorite movies, the Titanic. So we're going to talk about one of the most haunting artifacts from the Titanic, the Wallace Hartley's violin. If you've ever seen the movie Titanic, which I have several times, you probably remember the band playing on the deck, all of the violins as everything is like falling down around them. That moment was actually based on Hartley and his musicians who kept playing to be able to calm the passengers as the ship was going down. Fast forward to 2006, an old violin was discovered in an attic in England. It turned out to be one of the violin that Hartley was playing the night of 1912. When his body was recovered, the violin was still with him inside his suitcase, strapped to him as his life preserver kept to try and get him. After being passed quietly through different hands for nearly a century, the violin went to an auction in 2013 where it was sold for $1.7 million. That's crazy. Today, it's displayed at a museum attraction in Branson, Missouri, and still carrying the weight of one of history's most unforgettable nights. Can you believe that somebody took this great artifact and then put it up in their attic?
Yeah, that is crazy. And I adore this movie. And that scene from the movie is like so haunting and like vivid in my memory. And when you and I were putting this episode together and saw this piece of history that was found in an attic, I know we were just like this is pretty cool. I like that one.
Yeah.
All right, this one is not as cool. Let me just read the title. It's called A King's Head. Okay, a king's head, you think of them wearing a crown maybe, but what happens when a king actually loses his head? So we are talking King Henry IV of France, who supposedly brought peace between Catholics and Protestants with his policy of religious tolerance. He ruled back in 1589 until his assassination in 1610, but he was killed because of his religious beliefs. Then during the French Revolution, the remains of monarchs were destroyed, but somehow poor Henry's had survived. So fast forward a couple of centuries, In 1919, a photographer bought what was believed to be the king's head at an auction.
Why?
In
I just got to ask, why? Why would you buy somebody's head?
This is a tall tale, I think. In
Oh, yes,
1955,
I know.
let's follow the trail. It ended up with a French tax collector.
I wonder how much tax he had to pay.
Well, it doesn't stop there. In 2010, long after anyone thought his head would resurface, the same royal head was discovered in an attic.
I don't even want to know how it was preserved. It, like,
This
it
is,
just,
I feel like this is quite the story. I really don't know. I feel like this, and as the story actually says, even though some people declared it to be authentic, it was the
I
evidence
don't
didn't
want
really match up.
it. Yeah.
On to more fun things. Oh, wait,
I don't
we
know
don't
if
have
this
more.
is much funner. We'll just say if you don't have a head, maybe you have a whole body. This is the tale of the mummy. The next find involves a 10-year-old boy. Oh my goodness, could you imagine? Poking around his grandparents' attic in Germany, where he stumbles. I can just see it now. He's stumbling across some old wooden boxes. Harmless enough, except one of those boxes turned out to hold a mummy. Inside the largest crate was something decorated with hieroglyphics and carefully packed away. Secret from another world. Turns out that the boy's grandfather had traveled through North Africa at a time when Egyptian relics were being collected, and apparently one ended up in the family's attic. Now, I'm sure like we all like to go to our Goodwill or our Salvation Army and get a good find, right? I don't know if I've really gone looking for a mummy, but hey, I guess we're all looking for treasures in our own way. Curious if it was the real deal, the boy's father hauled the mummy off to Berlin to show a bunch of archaeologists. And while experts studied it, they can't help but think if horror movies have taught us anything, maybe it's best to leave the mummy in the coffin because you never know what might happen when you wake the past.
I don't think I want to find a head or a mummy. And this next one,
Or
and this next one happens to be a pirate hand. And it starts off, you need a hand? One Tampa man literally found one in his attic. Somebody by the name of Mike Lopez was doing a little spring cleaning when he found a dusty old box in his grandfather's attic. Inside, he discovered what a lot of kids might dream of, like a real life pirate treasure. We're talking, some of the things he found was like a really cool map of the Tampa Bay area, a pile of old Spanish coins, and underneath the map, there was more. There was a mummified skeletal hand, complete with a vintage pirate ring still clinging to it. I don't know. Some may think that's too good to be true. I'm not sure if I would agree with that. I think it would be really fun to find the coins, but the story really lined up with stories that his grandfather used to tell about their great grandfather who claimed he'd found treasure connected to Tampa's legendary pirate, Jose Gaspar. So Gaspar was often called one of the last Spanish pirates, really more folklore than fact, but Tampa does celebrate him every year with its massive Gasparilla Pirate Festival. You can imagine the buzz when Lopez's find hit the news. Antique experts confirmed the map was real, the coins genuine, in the hand, yep, a real human hand. Did the hand actually belong to the legendary pirate himself? Probably not, but they couldn't completely disprove it either.
I would think the vintage ring would maybe help. Like it's interesting. And at least something came with the hand, right? They got a map and they got some coins. That's much better than just a hand.
Yes. Yeah, I want the coins. All right. This one's cool. What do we have? This is a little bit.
Okay, this one is a little bit less creepy. It is a Van Gogh painting. Now, I would love to find something like this in my attic. I don't know about you guys. A nearly priceless ended up shoved in an attic, gathered dust of almost 40 years. Well, at least it wasn't an ear. That's hilarious. So the painting, it was called The Sunset of Montague, was created by Vincent van Gogh in 1888, eventually landed in the hands of a Norwegian collector, Christian Nicholas Mustad, who was convinced he had the original Van Gogh. And when the French diplomats took one look and declared it a fake, oh, that must have stunk. He panicked. He stashed it away in his attic where it sat forgotten for decades. Fast forward to 1991, the family brought the canvas to the Van Gogh Museum, hoping for redemption. Instead, they were told the same thing. Not a Van Gogh. Back to the shadows it went. However, 20 years later, new research techniques and a deep dive into the letters proved that they were all wrong. And it was truly, it wasn't just real, it was the first full-size canvas discovered in 1928.
Wow. Can you
That's pretty cool.
imagine?
That's pretty
And
cool. Can you imagine though, for years, like being told no, and then it was right?
yes, that's crazy. And a couple of times, yeah, they were told it wasn't. So I guess keep on, find a second expert, I think.
And it's interesting, Larissa. My husband is always adamant that, like, if you go to garage sales or if you go to flea markets, he's like, you just never know.
I do love a good flea market and antique sales. One of the things I love to collect is old books. So when I'm at different places, I always look through books to see if I can find any first editions. And I'm so fascinated with that.
Totally
So
agree.
this is another cool one. This is a Superman comic. So there was a home remodeler by the name of David Gonzalez, and he thought he was just restoring an old house in Hoffman, Minnesota. But instead, he stumbled onto literally the holy grail of comic books. It was a 70-year-old copy of Action Comics #1, which, if it's #1, I'm sure that was probably pretty premiere. And this was the one that introduced the world to Superman back in 1938. So it was unfortunately not in a protective glass vault or glass case or anything like that. He found it crumpled up in the attic. So it was stuffed inside the insulation among old newspapers and so forth. I guess Clark Kent maybe would have called that a pretty good disguise. Who knows? Of course, every superhero story does need a little drama. In this case, the comic was torn during a family argument, and the family argument is about whether or not they should sell it. Once they tore it, it was no longer in great condition to sell. In pristine condition, it could have actually fetched a price of $2.16 million. And that was the same price that another good copy had fetched. The comic Gonzalez had only paid $10,000 for the house. But when the comic finally did go to auction, it sold for $100,000. Pretty good profit, not the 2.16 million, but not bad.
I was gonna say that's a long way from $1 million, and it's interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I know that when you're a collector of those kind of things, like you really got to keep them wrapped and protected and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting that he got that much for it.
But gosh, finding a good treasure, that's everyone's dream.
For sure.
Before we wrap up, just a quick note on some of the things that PGM does find. There's a whole lot of hopefully interesting things, maybe in the attic, beyond heads and hands and mummies, that do speak to a house's condition. And we're talking about some of the stuff that really matters when it comes to marketing or for insurers underwriting risk. And as Michelle mentioned earlier in the podcast episode, this includes things like roof condition, windows, electrical systems, and of course, even stray water heater in the attic here and there. And truly, those are the home details that matter, not just for brands who are marketing, again, as we mentioned, with our Home Factors product, for insurers who want to better understand the risk profile of a home and connect with those homeowners and hopefully make some really smart decisions. So, on that note, we're wrapping up. Thanks all for listening to another fun episode. I hope you enjoy it. And until next time, keep exploring the attic, keep it curious, and as always, stay data driven. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks all.